So this week we're going to be looking at the elements of design, and a graphic designer really needs to have a good foundation in 2D design. These are basically the formal elements of 2D design. And so these elements are line, shape, value, color, texture, and format. So line seems very simple, but actually line has many variations. There's different ways you can draw and render lines to give them significance and meaning within your design space. And so weight, thickness, placement, direction. Are the lines curvy and organic? Are they straight and mathematical? These are all things that the designer really thinks about. So this was the photograph that the first illustration kind of was referencing. So you can see how in each of these square windows, they're very simple illustrations, but there's a lot happening with depth, with kind of visual organization, that the way the lines interact with each other, the direction they point in, can get this real visual flow and can create content. Here's kind of an example of these organic black lines sort of splattered onto the page in an ad. Then we have shape. Shape is a building block of design, and we have positive shape and negative shape, and in this example the positive and negative is a little bit ambiguous, and shape, like line, really has significance in the way the designer chooses to portray it. Some shapes are organic, some are rectilinear, some are literal, some are abstract. So we make a lot of decisions around what types of shapes to put in our illustrations and designs. Here's an example of that. And this shape has a lot of texture to it, but you can kind of see the shapes for the negative space kind of popping out here too. Then you have color. Color has specific properties. It has hue, which is the name of the color. It has value, which is the range of dark to light, and then it has saturation, which is the brightness or dullness of the color. And we have value, which is really about the balance between light to dark. Sometimes an image has a lot of contrast, sometimes an image is flatter, but how many gray tones are in that image? When Ansel Adams took a great photograph, he claimed there were 10 zones or 10 shades of gray visible in his black and white photography. So here's an example of value as well, where you have the green kind of color overlaid on top of the bag, and then you have value being used to create these shapes for the letters inside of it. This is a painting by Pablo Picasso, and it's a color, it's blue. It feels very kind of dark and depressing. It feels like this figure is sad, and it actually has a literal sensation or a physical sensation for me where I feel a little cooler when I look at this image. So sometimes color can give you almost a physical sensation or an emotional sensation. Here's an example of texture. And texture again, I love this one. The car, I just want to rub my hand against that car. And this is kind of a 2D example of texture in design. So these are all these kind of real organic wildlife illustrations where there's lots of texture. There is shape as well, and there's color, but texture seems to be kind of the dominant feeling that you get from this piece here. You really notice the texture. And then there is format. So format is just the size of the or the physical constraints. So the format will equal the constraints. So for example, when you're doing a CD cover, you have the back, you have the front, you have the spine. Each is a dimension in inches. So you have 9.75 by 5, and that includes a 0.125 bleed from top to bottom. And so this is really important for you to know and to discuss with the client before you begin the project, because it can really affect the design. Okay, so what we're going to do, I'm going to skip that one. I'm going to go on to our project, which is coming up this week. And what we're going to do, basically what we're going to work on this week is our line exercise. And for the line exercise, you have a problem. You're going to find a photograph, let me space this out a little bit, of something in nature. It can be a face, it can be architecture, and you're going to redraw the elements of the photo using only line. And you have to do this by hand. You can't use the computer. So you're going to find some black pens of different thicknesses, and I have some available. If you want to work during OpenLab, you can use the ones I have in OpenLab. And you're going to get some trace paper, and you're basically going to cover up the photograph with trace paper, and you're going to draw all of the lines you see, and you're really going to think about focal point. You're going to vary the size of the lines, the weight of the lines. You're going to create a sense of depth with the lines. And so it's really about looking, trying to find all the lines in the space, and have the photo, once you take it away from the trace paper and kind of remove the photo, the line illustration that you create should be kind of compelling and interesting. So you'll want to think about focal point. Where does the viewer look? Even though it's just lines, where is the viewer going to look? Is the negative space interesting? So even though you're trying to copy all the lines in the image, you really do want to kind of decide which lines you give weight and where you're going to look. So look at the project this week, and there's a kind of example of it here that you can look at. So here's the photograph, and here's the original line illustration done with that, and you can see how many different lines were drawn, how there's this real sense of weight and depth happening within the space. So let me know if you have questions, and this is our first week's lecture.